and welcome to This Week in Travel. I'm your host, Michelle Robson, and I'm also editor of Turning Left for Less. This week I'll be looking at the latest travel news and also taking a more in-depth look at how to spend abroad and also how to buy things in foreign currency without incurring big fees, and also how can you do this while still earning your points and miles. So first, let's have a look at the news. There's more talk of strikes this week at Heathrow, with the last-ditch attempts to avert this weekend's strike failing. So the strike will go ahead from today, the 4th of May, until the 6th of May, and then again on the 9th and 10th of May. So today, Unite have said that they have found out that security guards at Stansted and Gatwick get paid substantially more, in the region of £5,000 more than those at Heathrow. How true this is hard to substantiate, but if it is true, that's very interesting, because you would generally expect Heathrow to pay more, because obviously it is viewed as not only the busiest airport in the UK, but the most premium, well, at least it used to be. So it'll be interesting to see what happens now that that fact has come out. There's due to be more strikes at the end of May as well, but obviously we've got a few weeks in between, perhaps for more negotiations to happen. As I've said before, we're not expecting major disruption. I've not heard about British Airways cancelling any flights, but it could be that they're just keeping it quiet. We're just expecting there to be extra managers to fill in the gaps. And last time it didn't cause substantial problems apart from the cancellation of flights in advance. There's more strike news, with American Airlines pilots also voting to strike. Now this is slightly different, because unlike in the UK, voting to strike doesn't mean it's actually going to happen. What it means is that they've now signalled that they would be willing to strike if they can't come to an agreement. Legally, they now have to meet with American Airlines representatives and a mediator and go through a process to declare that they're in a deadlock. So if you are due to fly American Airlines soon, I wouldn't worry too much about it. I think it will be some time before anything happens, if it actually gets to that point. Like most countries, there's a shortage of pilots after COVID, so kind of the American Airlines pilots have the ball in their court. So we will see what American Airlines do in response. But yeah, I definitely wouldn't worry about that one too much at the moment. There's also a new offer with Avios, which is for Uber. So if you didn't know, you can earn Avios on Uber, but only when you're travelling within the UK. You can earn one Avios per pound spent, and that's on a normal Uber ride. However, they're now offering Uber Travel, which is basically trains, including Eurostar, and also coaches. And they have a special offer on at the moment if you buy it before the end of June, so the 30th of June, and you'll get 1,000 Avios bonus if you book before that point for any journey using Uber Travel. Now, even if you didn't actually want to book anything, as far as I can see in the conditions, you don't actually have to travel anywhere. So you could perhaps look at this as a way of buying Avios and look at what the cheapest journey you could buy it is. I've had a look through, and you can use the majority of rail cards with Uber Travel. Not all of them, but quite a substantial number. And most journeys seem to be available. The only thing I've found that you can't do so far is I can't see a way to do a rail air coach, but the normal National Express works, and most UK rail companies work as well. So some people have been saying that they're seeing problems with pricing of returns, so they're more expensive. So it's definitely worth comparing if you wanted to use it on a regular basis, looking at what you would normally pay, because it may actually work out more expensive to use Uber in some situations. However, you would still earn the same as you would for a normal Uber trip, in that you will get your one Avios per pound spent in normal times. And at the moment, obviously, you get the 1,000 Avios bonus. So you might decide, actually, I don't mind paying if it's slightly more, but if it's substantially more, it's probably not worth it. So let's have a look at our main topic for this week: spending abroad and also buying things in foreign currency. So for example, if you like to book direct, which I generally recommend, then you're generally going to have to pay in the currency of the country that you're travelling to for a hotel. And this actually brings charges. Whether you use a debit or credit card, the vast majority of banks will charge you. It's normally somewhere around 3%. And if you think, if you're spending £1,000 on a hotel, or potentially if there's a family trip, it could be a substantial amount of money that you're wasting. On £1,000, it would be a £30 charge typically. But there are actually lots of options that can save you money. So we're going to look at some different things, from prepaid cards to credit cards and debit cards. I'll talk about the ones that I use first, and then we'll look at some other options. So the two things that I mainly use when I'm spending abroad are Curve and also Revolut. Now they're two completely different things. Curve is a slightly unusual thing that you may not have used before. It appears as a debit card, so when you're using it, it would be viewed as a debit card, but actually there is no bank account associated with it or prepaid money. What it actually does is it charges one of your own credit cards, but by doing that it means that you don't have to pay the foreign exchange fees. Well, that's the theory. There's a few complications to it, but that's the general idea. So you can only link it to Mastercard and Visa card, which is a bit of a problem. When they first started, you used to be able to do American Express, which obviously had huge benefits, whereas now you can only link it to a Visa or Mastercard. However, there's plenty of points earning Visa and Mastercards that you could link it to. For example, I have my Virgin Atlantic Rewards Mastercard linked to it, but there's also the Barclaycard Avios and some of the HSBC cards as well that are Avios. So there's definitely opportunities to link it to one of your points or miles earning credit cards, and then every time you spend abroad, not only do you save the transaction foreign exchange fees, you also then get the points or miles as well. So that's why I tend to use Curve more than anything else. Some of the quirks are the fact that at weekends they do charge a small fee. So if you're going to buy something in advance, like a hotel or whatever, obviously you can then make sure that you don't use it at a weekend. Even if you do get charged, it's much less than the 3% charge. So it's still a saving, it's just not quite as good. There's various different options with Curve, from the free one right up to the paid one. I have the metal, which is one of the top cards, and that's, I think, around £150. Now, it does come with quite a few benefits. The reason that I have it is mainly because there's limits. Each stage of Curve has a different limit on how much you can spend, and obviously I travel a huge amount. So it's worth me spending £150 a year because I will spend huge amounts in foreign currency, and I don't want to lose out on getting my Avios points and my Virgin points. So that's why I tend to use that. It does also come with insurance for your gadgets. It's not the greatest insurance, having had to claim on it, where they basically mishandled my claim and I had to complain to get it sorted, because they were trying to say that they were only giving me the value of the phone as it was now, even though it was actually a replacement phone. So it all got very complicated. So I definitely wouldn't buy it just for that. The only reason I would generally go for the metal card would be because you want to spend a lot in foreign currency and you think it's worth the fee that you will save that £150. So that's why I would definitely think about doing the metal card if you're a high spender in foreign currency. So we'll next take a look at Revolut. Again, like Curve, they do different levels of card. I just have the basic free one, which I think is probably best for most people, but I know there are some new features coming soon that I'll be writing about on Turning Left for Less, so keep an eye out and we'll look at whether the new cards coming are actually worth it. So I tend to use Revolut for two main purposes, but in effect you can use it like a normal debit card. It's actually linked to what you would call a current account really, but you don't need to pay in regular amounts of money or have any direct debits going out like some companies will force you to do to change over and get any perks. So all I do is I will literally transfer money into my Revolut account when I want to do something in a foreign currency. And the way it works is a little bit different in that you have different wallets, as it were, in different currencies. So say I pay in £100 in UK currency, then I can decide, okay, so I'm going to the US, for example, and then I can transfer it into a US wallet with either no fee or very little fee. And then you can just use your card as you would normally. I generally use it just for taking cash out because obviously I've got my Curve card, so I'd rather actually be using the Curve card so that I make sure I get the points. But some people actually, if you're not that bothered about the points, it would be a perfectly easy way to just do it when you're abroad and use it as almost a prepaid card as such. So when you do it, it's all done through an app. I find the app generally very easy to use. The odd thing that's a little bit tricky to find, but for the basic things of exchanging into a different currency, for example, or withdrawing cash, it's very simple and it's all done pretty much instantly. They have a thing linked to your bank account where instead of having to go into, for example, NatWest, app, then in fact you do it all through the Revolut app, and it will take you actually through to your bank where you put in your usual password or whatever to get through to it, and then it transfers the money over. And this is almost instant. It says it's instant. Sometimes I've waited maybe 2 or 3 minutes, but it's never much more than that. So quite often I'll land somewhere and think, oh, I'll take some cash out, and I'll quickly just pop on the phone and transfer some money from my bank account, and then by the time I've got to the cash point, then the money's sitting there ready to withdraw. And as I said before, with Revolut, it is useful if you're going to pay someone. So, for example, you might have some sort of accommodation where they're asking for a deposit, sometimes even, bank details, which generally you wouldn't want to give them your current account. So, yes, you can use it to transfer money to people as well in different currencies without much of a fee. It's normally for about £100 to transfer to someone. I'm generally seeing a fee of maybe like a couple of dollars if I'm transferring into US currency. So it's pretty low. It's definitely lower than the normal rates that you'd pay. And I would also say the other thing to bear in mind with these sort of cards is that they will generally use the interbank rate of exchange, whereas quite often with credit cards they might actually use a worse rate. You just don't know unless you're going to go into detail. So at least you know that it's generally going to be one of the higher rates available, so you're getting a good exchange rate. I will also just mention before we go on to some different types of cards that it's worth considering where you buy your currency from, because I know some people actually will go to Travelex in the airport and actually just turn up and go, oh, I'd like to buy $100, which never ever do this, because it's like the most expensive way to get currency. There's nothing wrong with Travelex itself, just don't go to the airport stand without pre-ordering. So if ever I get currency, I will just generally pre-order. You can do it a couple of days in advance, and then you just pick it up at one of the desks at Heathrow or whatever airport you're going to. So yeah, don't just turn up, because you're always going to get a terrible rate. I would generally only do that if I know I'm landing somewhere very late or I think there's not going to be a cash point, and I desperately need cash. Otherwise I will nearly always take it out when I land from a cash point there, because it's generally a bit better value than you'll get from Travelex. So the next type of thing I'm going to talk about is a prepaid card. Now at the moment you can't actually get the British Airways Avios prepaid Mastercard because they've paused it, but hopefully it should be available again soon. So the final way to get cheap currency abroad would be to use a 0% foreign exchange card. There's quite a few of these. Most of these tend to be credit cards, but there are a couple of debit cards as well. Another card that's worth a mention that's relatively new to the scene is one called, in a bit of a pun here, Currensea, spelled S-E-A. And this is a little bit like Revolut in some ways, in that it's fed by your bank account, but the difference is that it actually does it automatically. So it's more simple than Revolut in that respect, but it's not entirely free. It's fee-free for withdrawals up to £500, but it does charge 0.5% on top of its interbank rate. So it has a good foreign exchange rate, but it will charge 0.05%. But I mean, really realistic, that's pretty low, and it's definitely going to be much better than using a normal credit card. So I would definitely consider Currensea. I will be writing something on the website about it shortly, but I'll put a link in below as well for you to have a look at, so that you can just look at it in the meantime if that sounds of interest. And then finally, there are also credit cards and debit cards that you can use abroad from particular banks that actually don't charge a fee or charge a very small fee. The most well-known one in the credit cards is probably the Halifax Clarity card, but in fact actually the other main banks do something similar. So NatWest has their Mastercard, which also has some fee-free spending abroad, and also there is the Barclaycard rewards card that again has a similar perk. So it's definitely worth having a look at whether you want to get a credit card that means that you get the fee-free spending, Or you might decide that actually you'd rather earn your Avios or points and use something like Curve, which is what I do. So you kind of get a double benefit with that. There's also some debit cards that are linked to bank accounts. There's one by Chase, which is an American bank, so it's a very well known big bank in America, and they have an interesting card that will give you 1% cash back, as well as having the no fees for using it abroad. So that's quite good in that obviously you're getting something back if you perhaps didn't want points or miles, but you wanted something a bit extra on top. So that's a good one to look at, and that's quite new. And then there's also the Starling Bank. Now this is one of the app-based banks, so you need to be reasonably happy to manage it through a smartphone. It's not one that has things like overdrafts or does credit checks, so it's quite an easy one to use, and you could just use that for your foreign spending rather than having it as your actual proper bank account. And it's very easy to apply. Again, it's all online through the app, and I'll put some details below of that. So that's all for this week. Next week, I'm going to have a look at how to get the best value when booking hotels. So how do you find the cheapest days, and should you book direct or should you book through the cheapest online company, and also where do you find those sort of comparisons? What's the best place to look at? So until then, happy travels.